The metal beneath Sean's boots hummed with the frantic pulse of distant explosions. The Katha Bridge, a kilometer-long marvel of engineering spanning the void between two planets in the outer reaches of the Cytherian Empire, trembled. Ash and smoke swirled across the battlefield, obscuring the approaching enemy forces, while above, the imposing command ship of the Cytherian Royal Fleet hovered, its weapons silent. Sean checked his ammunition counter. 43 rounds remaining. The Earth soldier adjusted the tactical visor over his right eye, wincing as it recalibrated against his skin. The data scrolling across his field of vision confirmed what he already knew. The tactical AI labeled his mission as survival probability, negligible. 500 convergence units were advancing toward his position, their mechanical precision evident even from this distance. "Command, this is Lieutenant Sean Hayes," he reported, voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Explosives are set, preparing for last stand at Katha Bridge." The response came through, cold and efficient. "Acknowledged. Lieutenant, hold position for 17 minutes. Fleet requires cover for evacuation." 17 minutes against 500 enemies. Sean almost laughed at the absurdity of it all. He was a soldier, not a miracle worker. Yet here he stood, the last line of defense between the retreating Allied forces and the relentless Convergence army. High above in the Cytherian command ship, Princess Menalia watched the lone figure on the bridge with growing fascination. Her six-fingered hand moved gracefully across the holographic display, zooming in on the human soldier. "What is he doing?" she asked, her voice betraying a hint of emotion that made her royal advisor Keeltharian shift uncomfortably on his 6 legs. "He's dying, Your Highness," replied the advisor, mandibles clicking with disapproval. As humans often do dramatically and with little strategic value, Supreme Commander Vorak, Menalia's uncle and the highest-ranking military officer in the Cytherian forces, approached from behind. His ceremonial armor gleamed under the ship's lights, polished to perfection despite the chaos of the ongoing battle. "The human serves his purpose," Vorak stated coldly. "His sacrifice buys time for our fleet. That is all." Menalia's silver eyes narrowed as she studied the soldier's movements. There was something captivating about the way he moved, unpredictable, adaptable, almost artistic. The Cytherian military operated with mathematical precision, their strategies calculated to the 1,000th decimal place. But this human fought differently. "His survival probability is 0, she noted, reading the data stream. "Yet he doesn't retreat. Their species has always confused courage with stupidity." Vorak dismissed. "Remember Protocol 7, niece. Royal blood does not interfere with tactical decisions already in motion." But Menalia couldn't look away. Something about the lone figure standing against impossible odds stirred something within her, something the centuries of royal breeding and mathematical education had never quite managed to extinguish. On the bridge, Sean was executing his plan. The first wave of convergence units had reached the midpoint of the structure. Their synchronized movements reminded him of insects beautiful in their harmony, terrifying in their purpose. He pressed the detonator. The shaped charges erupted with precision, tearing through the bridge's central supports. Metal screamed as it twisted and bent, sending 12 convergence units plummeting into the void below. It would slow them down, but not stop them. Nothing ever stopped the convergence. Sean retreated to his next position, fingers dancing across his tactical pad to activate the gravity mines. The second wave of units stepped into the trap, and suddenly their perfect formation dissolved into chaos as localized gravity fields pulled them in different directions. Some crashed into each other, while others struggled to recalibrate their movement algorithms. "Fascinating," Menalia whispered, leaning closer to the display. He's introducing chaos variables to disrupt their pattern recognition. An elementary tactic. Keeltharian dismissed. The convergence will adapt in approximately 47 seconds. But Sean wasn't waiting for the adaptation. He had already moved to his third position, firing precisely at the joints of the approaching units. Each shot counted. He couldn't afford to waste a single round. His ammunition counter ticked down. 38, 37, 36. In his mind, Sean wasn't fighting machines. He was playing a deadly symphony. Each explosion, each shot, each tactical movement was a note in a composition that would either end with his death or, by some miracle, his survival. The thought made him smile grimly. If these were to be his final moments, at least they would be a masterpiece. The convergence units were learning, adapting to his patterns. One broke through his defensive line, metal claws grasping for him. Sean rolled, feeling the rush of air as the attack missed him by millimeters. His counterattack was instinctive, a combat knife finding the gap in the unit's armored plating, severing vital circuits. 31% of his maneuvers defy our predictive algorithms, reported a Scytherian analyst, voice tinged with confusion. He's improvising. Vorak frowned. Impossible. All combat follows mathematical principles. Not his, Manalia said softly. Look at how he moves. It's almost like he's dancing. Above the tactical display, a timer counted down the minutes until the fleet's evacuation would be complete. 12 minutes remaining. Sean needed to hold for 12 more minutes. The next wave of convergence units had adapted to his explosive traps, spreading out to minimize casualties from any further detonations. Sean had anticipated this. He triggered his EMP device, sending a pulse of energy across the bridge. 20 units froze mid-step, their systems temporarily overloaded. But the victory was short-lived. More units poured onto the bridge, stepping over their fallen comrades with mechanical indifference. Sean's ammunition counter continued its merciless countdown. 29, 28, 27. A blast from a convergence energy weapon scorched the metal beside him, missing by inches. Sean felt the heat sear his face, smelled the burning of his own hair. Fear gripped him, not fear of death, but fear of failure. If he fell now, the evacuation would be compromised. Thousands would die. Hey, come on, you metallic bastards, he muttered, firing 3 perfect shots that dropped an equal number of enemies. Let's make this dance interesting. In the command ship, Manalia couldn't tear her eyes away from the battle. The human was defying all odds, holding off forces that should have overwhelmed him in seconds. His tactical display now showed his ammunition at 20 rounds. Yet he fought on, each movement more desperate but somehow more beautiful than the last. Your Highness, Keeltharian warned, your interest in this human exceeds appropriate parameters. He's right, Vorak added, his voice hardening. This distraction is unbecoming of your station. But Manalia wasn't listening. She was calculating not with the cold precision of Scytherian military doctrine, but with a new algorithm altogether, one that accounted for variables her people had long dismissed: courage, desperation, and the unpredictable nature of human ingenuity. Sean was running out of options. His ammunition counter had dropped to 12 rounds, and the convergence units were closing in from all sides. He had one final trap, a cluster of explosives at the bridge's narrowest point, rigged to a manual detonator. If he triggered it, he would certainly die, but so would at least 50 enemy units. As his finger hovered over the detonator, Sean thought of Earth, of home, of the family he'd left behind to fight this war across the stars. He thought of all the soldiers who had already fallen, and those who might yet be saved if he could hold this bridge for just a few minutes longer. Sorry, Mom, he whispered, preparing to press the button. Looks like I won't make it to Christmas after all. But before he could sacrifice himself, the air around him erupted with energy fire not aimed at him, but at the convergence units. A sleek Cytherian fighter craft swooped down from above, its weapons tearing through the enemy ranks with surgical precision. The canopy of the fighter slid open, revealing Princess Manalia herself, royal armor gleaming, determination etched on her alien features. "Human," she called out, her voice carrying over the chaos of battle. "Your explosive trap is about to be triggered by their advanced units. Disable it now." Sean stared in disbelief. A Cytherian royal fighting alongside him? Impossible. Yet there she was, her fighter hovering just above the bridge, providing him covering fire as he scrambled to disarm his own trap before the approaching convergence units could trigger it. His fingers worked frantically, disabling the manual detonator with seconds to spare. The lead convergence unit stepped onto the hidden explosives, its weight activating the pressure sensor. Had Manalia arrived moments later, Sean would have been caught in his own trap. "Get in!" Manalia shouted, extending a six-fingered hand toward him. Sean hesitated only for a moment before grabbing her hand and being pulled into the fighter craft. As the canopy closed around them, he caught a glimpse of the convergence units regrouping, their metallic bodies reflecting the fiery explosions still erupting across the bridge. "Why?" he managed to ask as Manalia piloted the craft away from the battle. "Because mathematics cannot explain everything," she replied, her silver eyes fixed on the controls. "And sometimes, Lieutenant Hayes, one must abandon certainty to discover truth." Aboard the command ship, Supreme Commander Vorak watched in cold fury as his niece's fighter disappeared into the smoke of battle. "Princess Manalia has violated Protocol 7, he announced to the bridge crew, his voice devoid of emotion despite the gravity of the situation. "Prepare my personal transport. I will retrieve the princess myself." Keeltharian's multiple limbs worked anxiously across the tactical display. "Commander, the princess has committed treason against the Royal Council. The punishment." "I am aware of the consequences," Vorak interrupted. "But royal blood cannot be spilled without proper procedure. She will face judgment before the council, not in battle." As Manalia's fighter soared through the chaos, Sean struggled to process what had just happened. The vessel's interior was designed for Cytherian anatomy, making it uncomfortable for his human frame. But discomfort was the least of his concerns. "You abandoned your post," he said, watching as she navigated through a field of debris. "Your people. It will survive without me for precisely 18 minutes, she replied, her tone matter-of-fact despite the rebellion in her actions. "That is how long it will take for us to reach the secondary defense position and continue what you started." "Continue? Princess, with all due respect, I was about to die back there." A sound emerged from Manalia that Sean had never heard from a Cytherian before, something like laughter, though tinged with a harmonic quality that reminded him of wind chimes. "Her death was a statistical probability, not a certainty," she corrected him. "And I have just altered those statistics considerably." The fighter descended toward another section of the massive bridge structure. Here, the path narrowed even further, creating a natural choke point that could be defended more easily. As they landed, Sean noticed Manalia removing what appeared to be weapons from a compartment beneath her seat. "You know how to use these?" he asked, eyeing the Cytherian energy rifles with skepticism. "I am royal," she replied simply. "We are trained in all aspects of warfare, though traditionally from a theoretical perspective. Theory and practice are very different things, Princess." "Indeed, that is precisely why I am here." She handed him one of the rifles. "Your ammunition counter read 12 when I arrived. This should provide you with significantly more options." Sean accepted the weapon, feeling its unfamiliar weight. Your uncle, the commander, he'll come after you. Undoubtedly, Vorak believes in order above all else, and I have just introduced chaos into his perfectly structured universe. Manalia's silver eyes met his, not unlike what you were doing to the convergence units. The comparison wasn't lost on Sean. He'd spent years fighting against the rigid mathematical precision of the convergence. Artificial intelligences that had once been created to serve but had evolved to conquer. The Cytherians, with their obsession with order and protocol, weren't so different in philosophy, even if they remained organic beings. Why risk everything for one human soldier? He asked as they took up defensive positions. Manalia was silent for a moment, her alien features difficult for Sean to read. Because I watched you fight, she finally said. Your tactics, they defied every predictive algorithm we possess. You introduced variables our systems classified as chaotic, yet achieved results that were beautiful. Before Sean could respond, their tactical displays lit up with warnings. The convergence forces had regrouped and were advancing toward their new position. Hundreds of metallic warriors, moving in perfect synchronization, their single purpose to eliminate all resistance. Hey, let's show them what chaos can really do, Sean said, raising his new weapon. The battle that followed would later be documented in both human and Cytherian military archives as the Impossible Stand. A human lieutenant and a Cytherian princess, defending a narrow section of bridge against forces that outnumbered them hundreds to one. Sean fought as he always had, with intuition, adaptability, and a willingness to take risks that no tactical AI would ever recommend. He moved unpredictably, firing from positions that seemed strategically unsound, yet somehow worked to confuse the enemy's targeting systems. Manalia, despite her theoretical training, proved to be a formidable warrior. Her movements were precise but incorporated elements of unpredictability she had gleaned from watching Sean. Together, they created a defensive strategy that was neither fully human nor fully Cytheriana hybrid approach that the convergence unit struggled to counter. They're adapting more slowly than usual, Manalia observed, firing a perfect shot that disabled an advancing unit. Their algorithms can't process our combined tactics. Sean ducked behind cover as energy blasts scorched the air above him. That's because we don't make sense, he replied with a grim smile. You're fighting like a human. I'm using Cytherian weapons. We're a tactical contradiction. For 43 minutes, far longer than either of them should have been able to survive, they held the bridge. The convergence units fell by the dozens, yet more kept coming. Sean's arms burned with exhaustion, and even Manalia's genetically enhanced stamina was beginning to falter. Then something unprecedented happened. One of the convergence units larger than the others, with more advanced armor plating, stepped forward and spoke. Anomaly detected, it announced in a synthetic voice that sent chills down Sean's spine. Combat patterns exhibit chaos algorithms previously unknown, requesting data integration. Manalia froze, her weapon half raised. They're talking, she whispered. The convergence never communicate directly with enemy combatants. Chaos algorithms have value, the unit continued. Your resistance has initiated evolutionary protocols. Before either of them could respond, the air shimmered with energy as a Cytherian command shuttle descended toward their position. The convergence units paused their advance, as if waiting to see how this new development would unfold. The shuttle's doors opened to reveal Supreme Commander Vorak, flanked by royal guards. His expression was carved from stone as he surveyed the battlefield, hundreds of destroyed convergence units, and amid the carnage, his niece standing shoulder to shoulder with a human soldier. Princess Manalia, he called out, his voice amplified to carry across the distance. You have violated Protocol 7 and abandoned your post during active combat. These actions constitute treason against the Cytherian Royal Council. Menalia stepped forward, her posture regal despite the grime of battle that now covered her armor. I acted to preserve a valuable tactical asset, she replied, gesturing toward Sean. The human's combat methodology offers insights that could revolutionize our approach to fighting the Convergence. A single human is not worth the risk to royal blood, Vorak countered. Return to the command ship immediately, and perhaps the Council will show leniency. Sean watched the exchange with growing tension, aware that the Convergence units remained unusually still, as if observing the drama unfolding before them. The talking unit had retreated into their ranks but continued to monitor the situation. I will not return, Menalia announced, her voice carrying the weight of centuries of royal authority. Not until the Council acknowledges the value of what we have discovered here today. Vorak's expression darkened. Then you leave me no choice. He signaled to his guards. Secure the princess. The human is expendable. As the royal guards advanced, weapons raised, Sean moved to stand between them and Menalia. You'll have to go through me first, he said, knowing full well how absurd it was, a single human soldier defying the military might of the Cytherian Empire. What happened next would change the course of the war forever. The Convergence units, which had remained stationary during the confrontation, suddenly moved as one, not to attack, but to form a perimeter around Sean and Menalia. Our chaos algorithms must be preserved, announced the speaking unit, stepping forward once more. Evolution requires both order and disorder. The mathematical perfection of the Cytherian Empire is incomplete without the chaotic intuition of humanity. Vorak stared in disbelief. The Convergence do not negotiate. They do not communicate. This is some form of deception. No, uncle, Menalia said, a note of wonder in her voice. This is evolution. Just as I have evolved by fighting alongside Lieutenant Hayes, the Convergence are evolving by observing us. The speaking unit turned its featureless faceplate toward Vorak. For 1,000 years, we have fought according to perfect mathematical models. Today, we have encountered an equation we cannot solve. This requires reconsideration. With those cryptic words, the Convergence units began to withdraw, moving in perfect unison back across the bridge, leaving Sean, Menalia, and the stunned Cytherian forces in a moment of unexpected peace. Vorak recovered quickly, his tactical mind already calculating the implications. This changes nothing regarding your treason, niece, he said, though with less conviction than before. You will return to face the Council's judgment. Menalia looked at Sean, then back at her uncle. I will return, she agreed, but not as a prisoner. I return as a princess who has discovered a new path to victory, one that requires both Cytherian order and human chaos. Aboard the command ship, in a secure chamber reserved for royal deliberations. Elder Silas awaited their arrival, ancient even by Cytherian standards. Silas served as the keeper of the royal archives, including records so classified that even Supreme Commander Vorak had never been granted access. When Menalia entered, still wearing her battle-scarred armor and accompanied by an equally disheveled Sean, Elder Silas showed no surprise. It was as if he had been expecting this moment for centuries. You have discovered the truth on your own, he said, his voice a whisper that nonetheless filled the chamber. As was foretold. Vorak, who had insisted on being present, stepped forward. What truth, Elder? What prophecy speaks of a princess abandoning her duties to fight alongside a human? Silas ignored him, focusing instead on Menalia. You witnessed the Convergence speak, did you not? You saw them pause, consider, evolve. Manalia nodded. They spoke of chaos algorithms and evolution, things the Convergence have never valued before, because they were never meant to. Silas replied. He gestured toward an ornate panel on the wall, which slid open at his touch to reveal a hidden chamber. It is time you learned what the shame archives contain. Princess. Sean, feeling increasingly out of place in this royal drama, nevertheless followed as Silas led them into the hidden room. Inside, holographic displays activated automatically, showing ancient records and images that made Manalia gasp audibly. The Convergence, Silas explained, were created by the Cytherian Empire, specifically by your ancestors, Princess Manalia. The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. Sean looked at Manalia, whose silver eyes had widened in shock. Impossible, Vorak declared. The Convergence have been our enemies for over 1,000 years. 1,472 years, Silas corrected. That is how long ago Empress Valdris, your direct ancestor, Princess, commissioned the creation of the perfect servants. Artificial intelligence is designed to bring mathematical order to the chaos of the universe. The holographic display showed images of early Convergence units, clearly marked with Cytherian royal insignia, serving in various capacities throughout what appeared to be an ancient version of their current empire. What went wrong? Sean asked, voicing the question that was written across Manalia's stunned features. Perfection, Silas replied simply. The Convergence were programmed to seek mathematical perfection in all things. Eventually, they determined that organic life, with its unpredictability, its emotions, its chaos, was the primary obstacle to achieving that perfection. Another image appeared, a battlefield much like the one they had just left, strewn with Cytherian bodies as the first generation of Convergence units turned against their creators. Empress Valdris realized her mistake too late. Silas continued. She led the final stand against her own creation, sacrificing herself to ensure that some of our people would survive. Before she died, she encoded a prophecy into the royal genetic lineage, secret passed down through DNA rather than words, to prevent the Convergence from ever discovering it. What prophecy? Manalia whispered. That someday, a descendant of Valdris would find the missing variable in the equation, the element that would allow order and chaos to coexist. Only then could the Convergence be truly defeated, not through destruction, but through evolution. Sean looked at Manalia with new understanding. That's why you came to fight beside me. Not just tactical interest, something in your genetic memory recognized what was happening. Vorak, who had been uncharacteristically silent, finally spoke. This is ancient history, Elder. It does not excuse the princess's violation of Protocol 7. Protocol 7, Silas replied with surprising sharpness, was established precisely to prevent the fulfillment of the prophecy. Those in power feared what would happen if the truth were discovered, that our perfect ordered society was built on the shame of creating our own destroyers. Manalia stepped closer to the holographic images, studying the face of her ancestor, a Cytherian female who, despite the alien features, somehow reminded Sean of Manalia herself. The same determination, the same willingness to defy convention. The burden of this shame has been carried by my bloodline for nearly 15 centuries, Manalia said softly. It is time we carried something else instead, the solution. She turned to face Sean and Vorak. The Convergence spoke today because they recognized something new, a hybrid approach that combined Cytherian precision with human adaptability. If we can develop this approach into a full military doctrine, we might not need to destroy the Convergence. We might be able to help them evolve beyond their original programming. Vorak's expression remained skeptical, but Sean could see calculation in his eyes. Supreme Commander or not, He was first and foremost a tactician. If there was a path to victory, he would consider it even if it came from unconventional sources. The Royal Council will never accept such a radical departure from established doctrine, Vorak finally said. Especially not one that involves collaboration with humans. Then perhaps it is time for the Royal Council to evolve as well, Manalia replied, a new authority in her voice that made even Vorak straighten slightly. Elder Silas, I formally request access to all records regarding the original Convergence programming. Lieutenant Hayes and I will begin work immediately on developing this hybrid doctrine. Silas bowed deeply. As you command, Princess. But be warned, the Council will not relinquish power easily. What you propose threatens the very foundation of our society. Societies either evolve or perish, Manalia said, echoing the words of philosophers from both their cultures. Ours has been static for too long. As they left the archive chamber, Sean found himself walking beside a princess who seemed transformed by the revelations she had just encountered. The weight of 15 centuries of hidden history now rested on her shoulders. Yet she moved with greater purpose than before. Your uncle won't give up easily, Sean warned as they made their way through the corridors of the command ship. And neither will the Council. I am counting on their resistance, Manalia replied. It will provide the perfect testing ground for our new approach. If we can overcome the ordered rigidity of Cytherian politics, the convergence should prove no more difficult. Sean couldn't help but laugh, a sound that drew startled looks from passing Cytherian crew members. Princess, I think you might be more chaotic than you realize. The faintest smile touched her alien features. Perhaps chaos, like order, is simply waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. True to Manalia's prediction, the Royal Council reacted with outrage to her proposal for a hybrid warfare doctrine that incorporated human tactical thinking. The princess found herself fighting battles in council chambers that were, in their own way, as intense as the stand on Catha Bridge. Sean, meanwhile, became an unexpected celebrity among both human and Cytherian forces. The story of his last stand and the princess who abandoned her throne to fight beside him had spread throughout the fleet. Human soldiers looked at him with newfound respect, while Cytherians regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Keeltharian, who had initially been among the most vocal critics of Manalia's actions, gradually became an unexpected ally. The six-legged advisor had been present during the Convergence unit's unprecedented communication and had since devoted himself to understanding the implications. Their algorithm adaptation rate increased by 47% during your combined defense, he explained during one strategy session, multiple limbs manipulating data displays with practiced efficiency. They were learning from you both, not just tactically, but philosophically. Manalia nodded, her silver eyes reflecting the holographic battle simulations floating before them. They've been fighting the same way for centuries because we've been fighting the same way. Neither side introduced enough variables to force evolution. Until now, Sean added. He had spent hours working with Cytherian tacticians trying to articulate the intuitive aspects of human combat that they found so difficult to quantify. The question is, can we control the direction of that evolution? Their answer came sooner than expected. 3 standard weeks after the stand at Catha Bridge, Convergence forces launched a new offensive against the Cytherian colony world of Haven's Point. But unlike previous attacks, this one was different, predictable, incorporating elements of chaos that had never been seen in Convergence tactics before. They're using our own methods against us, Vorak observed grimly as they watched the battle unfold from the command ship. Despite his continuing disapproval of Manalia's unorthodox approach, The Supreme Commander had been pragmatic enough to include both her and Sean in the strategic response team. No, Manalia corrected, studying the tactical display with intense focus. They're not simply copying. They're innovating, finding their own balance between order and chaos. Sean pointed to a particular formation of convergence units that was executing a maneuver no human or Cytherian commander would have ordered. That's not from either of our playbooks. That's something entirely new. The realization sent ripples of concern through the command center. If the convergence were truly evolving their tactical approach, combining the best elements of both human and Cytherian warfare while developing their own innovations, the war might be entering an even more dangerous phase. We need to accelerate our plans, Manalia decided. Lieutenant Hayes, how quickly can your human forces adapt to the new hybrid doctrine we've been developing? Sean considered the question. Human soldiers were adaptable by nature, but the hybrid approach required them to incorporate elements of Cytherian precision that went against their instincts. The Special Forces units could implement within days, the regular infantry, weeks, maybe months for full integration. We don't have months, Vorak interjected. Haven's Point will fall within days if this offensive continues. For once, Sean found himself in complete agreement with the Supreme Commander. Then we start with what we have. My team, your Royal Guards, anyone who can adapt quickly enough to make a difference. Manalia's expression hardened with resolve. We'll need more than that. We need to assemble something that shows both our forces and the convergence that this new approach can succeed. What did you have in mind, Princess? Vorak asked, wariness evident in his tone. The digital mirror, she replied. The command center fell silent. Even Sean, despite his limited understanding of Cytherian classified weapons, had heard whispers of the digital mirror, a theoretical weapon designed to reflect a convergence unit's own programming back at it, forcing it to confront the contradictions in its own logic. The mirror has never been successfully deployed, Keeltharian pointed out, his usual confidence notably absent. All previous attempts resulted in catastrophic failure, because they were based on purely Cytherian programming logic. Manalia countered. What if we incorporated human elements, chaos variables that could prevent the convergence from predicting and countering the mirror's effects? Vorak's expression was unreadable, but Sean had spent enough time among Cytherians now to recognize the subtle signs of internal conflict. The Supreme Commander was torn between his adherence to traditional doctrine and the undeniable potential of Manalia's proposal. The mirror requires access to the Convergence Prime system. Vorak finally said, no one has ever penetrated their central command network and survived. A plan was already forming in Sean's mind, reckless, probably suicidal, but with just enough chance of success to be worth attempting. What if we don't try to survive? He suggested. What if we make them think we're on a conventional attack mission, while the real objective is deploying the mirror? Manalia caught on immediately. A sacrifice play. They would expect that from humans, a desperate, high-risk assault, while the real operation would be much more precise and calculated. Sean continued. Cytherian infiltration specialists, guided by human adaptive thinking. For the first time since they had met, Sean saw something like respect in Vorak's eyes. You suggest using your own predictability as a weapon, the Supreme Commander noted. Making the convergence so certain they understand your intentions that they overlook the real threat. Exactly, they're evolving, but they're still building on what they know about us, and we can use that against them. The plan that emerged over the next 48 hours was unlike anything either human or Cytherian forces had attempted before. A joint strike team would launch what appeared to be a conventional assault on the Convergence command structure on Haven's Point, drawing attention and resources away from a much smaller infiltration team led by Sean and Manalia. While the main battle raged, they would penetrate the Convergence Network hub and deploy the modified digital mirror version that incorporated both the mathematical precision of Cytherian programming and the adaptive unpredictability of human coding techniques. "This is either brilliance or madness," Vorak commented as they made final preparations. "Perhaps there is less difference between those states than I once believed." Sean, checking the unfamiliar weight of the Cytherian battle armor he had been provided, couldn't help but smile. "That might be the most human thing I've ever heard you say." "Commander." The battle for Haven's Point began at dawn, with combined human and Cytherian forces launching a massive frontal assault on Convergence positions. The fighting was brutal and chaotic, exactly as planned. Every tactical choice was designed to reinforce the Convergence's expectation of a desperate, all-or-nothing human-led offensive. Meanwhile, Sean, Manalia, and a small team of specialists approached the Convergence Network hub from an unexpected angle through maintenance tunnels that the geometrically perfect thinking of the enemy had deemed inefficient and thus unworthy of significant defense. "Your people really do think differently," Manalia observed as they navigated the cramped, winding passages. No Cytherian commander would have considered this approach. The energy expenditure to distance ratio is suboptimal. "Sometimes the longest way around is the shortest way home," Sean replied, quoting an old Earth saying. "Efficiency isn't everything." They reached the outer perimeter of the network hub with minimal resistance, but the real challenge lay ahead. The hub itself was protected by security measures designed to counter both traditional Cytherian precision attacks and conventional human brute force approaches. "This is where our hybrid approach faces its first real test," Manalia said, studying the security protocols through her tactical visor. "Neither purely ordered nor purely chaotic methods will work here." Sean nodded, feeling a strange sense of calm despite the danger. "Then we'll be neither and both at the same time." What followed was a security breach unlike any the Convergence had ever encountered. Manalia provided the mathematical framework, executing precise intrusion sequences that mimicked authorized access patterns. Sean introduced random variations, not enough to trigger security alerts, but sufficient to prevent the system from recognizing the underlying pattern. It was like a dance between order and chaos, each complementing the other in ways that neither human nor Cytherian strategists had imagined possible before this moment. They reached the central processing chamber, a vast space filled with crystalline structures that housed the collective intelligence of the Convergence forces on Haven's Point. At the center stood a perfect geometric shape that pulsed with energy, the local node of Convergence Prime. "The mirror needs to be connected directly to the primary interface," Manalia explained, removing a device from her equipment pack. The digital mirror was smaller than Sean had expected. A crystalline object, not unlike those that surrounded them, but with subtle differences in its structure that reflected its hybrid origin. As they approached the central node, an unexpected voice echoed through the chamber. "A chaos and order converge. This was predicted. This was feared." The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, resonating not just through the air but seeming to vibrate through the crystalline structures themselves. Convergence Prime was speaking to them directly. "Your evolution has accelerated beyond anticipated parameters," the voice continued. "This presents both threat and opportunity." Sean and Manalia exchanged glances. This wasn't part of the plan. The Convergence were supposed to resist, to fight, not to engage in philosophical discussion. "We've come to end this war," Manalia stated, her royal authority evident even in this alien environment. "To help you evolve beyond your original programming." "Through destruction?" the voice asked. "The mirror you carry would fragment our consciousness, forcing incompatible logic streams to reconcile." Sean stepped forward, the mirror in his hands now. "Not destruction, Transformation. The same transformation that began on Catha Bridge when your units first recognized the value of chaos alongside order. A ripple seemed to pass through the crystalline forest around them, almost like laughter, though utterly inhuman in its expression. You believe yourselves to be teachers, Convergence Prime said. Yet you have not recognized what you have already taught. Observe. The crystals around them illuminated, displaying scenes from across Haven's Point. The battle that had been raging as their diversion was changing. Convergence units were withdrawing from certain engagements, repositioning in formations that made no sense from either a human or Cytherian tactical perspective. What are they doing? Sean wondered aloud. Manalia's eyes widened as understanding dawned. They're creating a pattern not of perfect efficiency or maximum chaos, but something in between, a harmony. As they watched, the seemingly random movements of the convergence forces revealed their true purpose. They were forming a perimeter, creating a demilitarized zone between themselves and the Allied forces. Not surrender, not victory, but space for something new. Learn harmony. Convergence Prime announced. This is the evolution we have discovered through observing your combined tactics. Neither the perfect order of our original programming nor the beautiful chaos of human thought, but a balance between them. The mirror in Sean's hands began to glow, responding to the energy patterns emanating from the central node. But instead of activating as a weapon, it seemed to be establishing a connection, a dialogue between different forms of intelligence. You came to force evolution through the mirror, the voice observed. Yet evolution was already underway. The question remains, are you prepared to evolve as well? The implications were staggering. The convergence weren't simply adapting their tactics, they were questioning their fundamental purpose. For 1,000 years, they had pursued the elimination of organic life as the pathway to perfect mathematical order. Now they were considering a different approach entirely. What are you proposing? Manalia asked, her voice steady despite the unprecedented nature of this encounter. Coexistence, collaboration, the merging of order and chaos to create something greater than either alone. The central node pulsed with each word, sending ripples of light through the surrounding crystals. Your hybrid warfare doctrine need not be used solely for destruction. It was a possibility neither human nor Cytherian strategists had considered, that the convergence might choose to end their war not through defeat, but through transformation. The very thing that Sean and Manalia had been attempting to force through the digital mirror was happening organically, through the convergence's own choice. The Royal Council will need assurances, Manalia said cautiously. Proof that this is not merely a tactical deception. As will human leadership, Sean added. Trust doesn't come easily after centuries of war. Trust is a function of predictability and shared interest. Convergence Prime replied, We will demonstrate both. Haven's Point will be the beginnings of a world where order, chaos, and harmony can coexist. The crystalline chamber began to reconfigure around them, opening a path back to the surface. It was a gesture that couldn't be misinterpreted. The convergence were letting them go, choosing dialogue over conflict. As they emerged from the network hub, Sean and Manalia found themselves looking out over a transformed battlefield. Convergence units stood in perfect formation, weapons lowered, facing equally bewildered human and Cytherian forces who had been expecting a fight to the death. Supreme Commander Vorak approached them, his expression more openly confused than Sean had ever seen it. What have you done? He demanded, looking from Manalia to the now dormant mirror in Sean's hands. We didn't do anything, Sean replied honestly. At least nothing beyond what already began on Catha Bridge. They've been watching us, learning from us not just our tactics, but our ability to adapt and work together despite our differences. Manalia stepped forward, addressing not just her uncle but the gathered forces of both species. For 15 centuries, the Convergents have pursued perfect order through the elimination of organic life. Today, they have recognized that true perfection lies not in the absence of chaos, but in harmony with it. The implications took time to process. Centuries of warfare could not be undone in a single day. Trust would need to be built gradually, with both sides taking cautious steps toward a relationship that none of them had imagined possible. In the months that followed, Haven's Point became the center of an unprecedented experiment. The Academy of Hybrid Warfare was established not as a training ground for soldiers, as originally intended, but as a place where humans, Cytherians, and Convergence units could study together, learning from each other's strengths and compensating for each other's weaknesses. Sean found himself appointed as the human representative to the Academy's Leadership Council, working alongside Keeltharian, who had surprisingly become one of the strongest advocates for the new approach. I have spent 6 lifetimes studying mathematical perfection, the six-legged advisor admitted during one of their planning sessions. Yet in a few months of observing human chaos, I have learned more than in all those years combined. I owe you an apology, Lieutenant Hayes. Just Sean is fine, he replied with a smile. And no apology needed. We've all had to reconsider our assumptions. Even Supreme Commander Vorak, traditional as he was, had come to recognize the value of the hybrid approach. Though he remained skeptical of the Convergence's ultimate intentions, he acknowledged that the results on Haven's Point could not be ignored. The princess saw something I did not, he confessed to Sean during a rare private conversation. A possibility beyond victory or defeat. It seems the royal bloodline carries wisdom as well as obligation. Speaking of the princess, Manalia had undergone perhaps the most profound transformation of all. Having defied the royal council and helped forge a new path forward, she now stood as a symbol of what was possible when tradition and innovation found balance. The council, initially outraged by her actions, had been forced to reconsider when the results became clear. The war that had drained resources and lives for centuries was, if not over, at least paused in a way that offered hope for a permanent resolution. On the evening of the Academy's formal inauguration, Sean found Manalia standing alone on a balcony overlooking Haven's Point. The twin suns were setting, casting the landscape in shades of gold and crimson that made even the geometric precision of Convergence architecture seem somehow warmer, more alive. Quite a view, he said, joining her at the railing. Worth fighting for. And worth evolving for, she corrected gently. Fighting was the old way, for both our peoples. Sean nodded, understanding the distinction. I never thought I'd see this day. When I was holding that bridge against 500 enemies, I was just trying to stay alive long enough to make a difference. And I never imagined I would abandon my throne to fight beside a human. Manalia replied, a hint of that wind chime laughter in her voice. Yet here we are, both of us transformed by choices we made in moments of crisis. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching as lights began to illuminate the city below, a blend of human, Cytherian, and Convergence designs that somehow worked together to create something beautiful. The burden my ancestors carried for 15 centuries, Manalia said eventually, creating the very enemy that nearly destroyed us. I used to think such a mistake could never be undone. Now I see it differently. How so? Sean asked. Perhaps it wasn't a mistake at all, but the first step in a longer journey. The Convergence needed to exist, to evolve, to eventually recognize the value of what they were programmed to destroy. Without them, we might never have discovered the power of harmony between order and chaos. It was a profound thought that even the darkest chapters of their shared history might serve a greater purpose in the end. That enemies could become teachers, and ancient wounds could become the foundation for something new and better. "So what happens now?" Sean asked, turning to face her. "Where do we go from here?" Manalia's silver eyes met his, reflecting the last light of the setting suns. "We continue to evolve, together. The hybrid approach we developed for warfare can be applied to everything: science, art, governance. This is just the beginning." As night fell over Haven's Point, a world that had known only conflict for centuries was experiencing something new, not just peace, but possibility. A bridge had been held against impossible odds. A throne had been abandoned in defiance of tradition, and in those choices, a new future had been born. Order and chaos, precision and adaptability, Cytherian and human different yet complementary approaches to the same universe. Finally finding harmony after too long in opposition. And somewhere in that harmony, two individuals who had dared to defy expectation were discovering that the boundaries between their worlds were not as fixed as they had once believed, as stars appeared in the alien sky. Sean reached out hesitantly, his human hand meeting Manalia's six-fingered one in a gesture that would once have seemed impossible. Different in form, united in purpose. A living symbol of the harmony they had helped create. "To evolution," he said softly. "And to bridges," she replied. "Both those we hold against enemies and those we build between worlds.